Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. That means it is time to start finding your own damn way here on the Beaver Network. It's every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I usually talk about systems, and I talk about helping people to understand civics and those kind of educational conversations and bringing in guests. But because of the election, we're doing all things election related. So I'm just going to start the conversation going this afternoon, and with a little bit of a reminder, everybody's been doing so well with offering gifts, but the gifts up here, the gift goals are all given and shared with the hosts. A lot of emotional energy goes into putting these shows on, and some administrative costs as well, for how to make fancy graphics and stuff like that. But the money and the gifts you do contribute are to support the individuals you're actually watching. So that's really great. We have subscriptions that get you access to Discord, $4.99 a month. In Discord, you have more detailed conversations about what you're hearing in these rooms, and you can have sidebar conversations, video conversations. You can post articles. And of course, we're now on YouTube. So please follow us on YouTube and subscribe there. It's free to subscribe. So that's the plug for the Beaver Politics. Kind of like, share. We only have 4 people in the room. AI, or is it Al? Election Buzz Chat, absolutely. So let's start with some conversation about the French debate last night. I did watch the debate, and my feedback on it as an English-speaking person, it is just very painful to kind of get through some of it, right? Like, they each had a translator for the politicians, but the translators' voices were so monotone and so bland that if the politicians were talking at the same time, I got confused about who was saying what, right? Like, it was hard to follow. Some things, like if it's a real obvious statement around platform and you know it, but if it was like even just the sidebar insults and stuff, it was hard to, not that there was a lot of that, but it was just hard to track all that side conversations. You kind of lose the nuance of a room that way. So I was a little frustrated with that. I think yesterday's main conversation, the Green Party getting not allowed into the debate by a debate commission that puts on these debates, and letting them know it's the last minute, was just bullshit, I think that when you have party status like that, this little rule about, you got to meet 90%, have candidates in 90% of the ridings. Well, in Canada, we're supposed to be about equity, not equality. And so on an equitable level, the Greens have stepped forward and have standing in our parliament. They have had at least 12 seats elected so that they can sit as a party representative, right? And so when they're not there because they didn't meet this other criteria rule put in by the commission, I think that rule needs to be revisited. Personally. And yes, that does leave room for people like Maxime Bernier's party, the People's Choice Party, some of that rural extremist voice to get in there. But when you've got a small voice, it is hard enough to be heard. And I think that we did a disservice to the Green Party and giving them the boot and doing so in a chastising way the day of the debate or the day before the debate. It was nonsense as far as I was concerned. I also think having the French debate when the bottom line probably doesn't have a really strong impact on what the voting results are going to be. To me, like in Quebec, they are swing voters in that province. That's what makes Quebec so functional, actually, is because they have swing voters. I was listening to a video Billy put out. Alberta, they're always complaining that they don't have, anybody really talking on their behalf and representing them. And that's because they're not swing voters. They're always voting Conservatives. So Conservatives don't have to do any work to get their vote. Liberals aren't going to spend any time there, or the NDP. So they've backed themselves into this corner where because they are... because they are just conservative and nothing else will do, then they have created their own box. Whereas Quebec and even Eastern Canada, those are swing voters. Politicians have to care about them. They have to go out and look after their interests because those people are demanding it. So in becoming, one party only, and a multi-party system, you box yourself into a corner. Let me see. I see some comments going by. Kyle Brady, the Green Party is a wasteful use of tax money. There's a reason they're always last in the polls. I don't think they're a wasteful use of anything. They're a voice in our political system, and in democracy, they've earned enough voices to seat 12 members at the table to get party status. So I think that those voices need to be honored. And they may be a smaller voice, but they have grown over the years. And there's probably something going on with the way that they market themselves to not grow their voice larger. I, for instance, am very confused about the Green Party because I appreciate the environmental piece, but they vote right-wing all the time financially with conservatives and stuff. So I don't get that they're not left-leaning enough for someone like me that leans to the left. But I don't think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think that we need to have more voices I think we need to have more voices at the table. So I don't see it that way. But I thank you for your opinion. Where would those tax dollars go? Here's a question for you, Kyle. Where would you see those few tax dollars? Where would you see them go? Would you distribute them equally between the other four parties that are standing there? Because, parties are funded by, how many ridings they have, how many people are involved. Where would that money go? Where would that money go? Just a question. Good day. PP did get his back and handed to him during the debate. I don't think there was anything quite so exciting going on that way. But what I noticed about, he got called out on his lies. So no doubt about that. And I appreciated hearing that. But what I seen was somebody slithering in their own skin, right? That guy was so calm. He was so cool. He kept his mouth. He wasn't blubbering the way he always does, throwing the insults, slamming the slogans. He wasn't slamming the slogans last night. And if he did, it was in a nice, calm, build back, Canada's broken. He was just so, you could almost feel his itchiness and just standing still like that in that debate, doing what he felt necessary for that particular French debate, I suppose. But it wasn't a genuine, I call him Tiny Trump, right? Tiny Trump did not show up to the debate last night. He did not. He put on his blue suit and he behaved a little better, right? He behaved a little better. And if that's the real Tiny Trump, he needs to show up like that a lot more, because people like myself, people who are swing voters that are on the left side of the world, we need to see more than slogans. We need full sentences. We need to have that conversation. And he didn't get there in that debate. There wasn't time. You don't have time in a debate. You have to do that beforehand. So when you're giving your one-line answers, your debate in full, the hour-long conversation that fills that one line has already taken place. Tiny Trump has blown all of those chances, right? He has spent his time doing rallies and slogans and coming up with, he's just too clever. He's just too clever in his conversation. Doesn't get the points out there. Some comments were filtered. Okay. Election talk show. Yes, this is all things elections. I want to promote tonight's show with Frontline Feminist and Mrs. Radical. They are Truth Through Discord, and they'll be covering the debate tonight live, the English debate. So please tune into that at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. They too will be reaching gift goals and looking for subscriptions and expanding the conversation around this election, because we have got to stop the Conservatives from getting into power. Point blank. Carney did remind him of how he's not Justin. Yes, I would say Carney very much reminded everybody about how he's not Justin. And part of how he does that is by identifying what didn't work, like the carbon tax, right? Carney comes from a background of a banker. That's why Stephen Harper loved him. That's why the Conservatives tried to grab onto him, offered him the Minister of Finance position, offered, to work with them. Carney chose not to work with the Conservatives because they were radical back then. They are radical. That's where Stephen Harper and all this long-term agenda around the International Democratic Union, that's where the roots were growing. But Mark Carney knew that, and he chose not to be part of the Conservative leadership back then, and there was a reason. There was a reason. It's not on our tax bill for existing. I don't know what that means, Kyle. Thank you for helping us get our gift goals. Pierre tried to get his slogans out. He did, but when you've got a translator that's like, Canada is broken, like axe to tax, just so monotone. Those slogans just fell super flat. And then of course he's got this, one of the things I think worked against Tiny Trump, the way he reimagined himself without glasses, he's all his AI photos with the buff t-shirt look and stuff, that kind of all fell down last night, because there he was, and it's like, just like his face most of the time just looked kind of like goofy, right? And so I didn't see him as strong presenting, and that is a bit of a deflation for the way he's selling and marketing himself out on the election campaign online and stuff like that, right? I heard he wore shoe risers to make himself look taller. I don't know if that's true either. Somebody did compare the height. They're all basically the same height. I did notice a lot of mansplaining in the standing for the picture, especially with from Quebec there. I mean, that guy's legs are wide apart, like full. Like, I know he's a bit bull-legged, but wow, taking up space, right? And all like, the way that they stand. I as a feminist, anyway, I took note of that. So I don't know if he wore risers, but that wouldn't surprise me at all. And you know what? I don't know that I'm even against that. I may have women wear high heels, right? Polychick's here. Hi, Polychick. Thank you for dropping in. Appreciate seeing your name in here. Kind of Millhouse. Yes, kind of Millhouse. That would be a good way to describe what happened with Tiny Trump last night. I don't have any of his conversations standing out. Nobody's conversation really stood out. Mark Carney had, of course, everybody, kind of throwing the dabbers at him, but he held his own, and there was no new news. There was nothing new to discover there. He was the one that lied the most. Who, Tiny Trump? Oh yeah. Somebody was saying, like, the conversation when they were talking about how many houses did you build when you were Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper? And he said thousands. It's not. It was 6. It was 6. And it's so easily debunked, and that he would get up there and lie about that. I don't know if I could put a kudos out about last night's show was the interviewer, the reporter. That guy was charismatic. That guy controlled the crowd really well, I thought. And I don't know who he is. I don't know his name, but I remember him being, you paid attention when he was talking because the energy was in his voice, right? The energy was in his voice. I think we're going to see a different level of energy from the players tonight because they're just more comfortable in their English language. And that even though Tiny Trump speaks and Jagmeet speak more fluent French, and of course the guy from Quebec, when it comes to English, they're still more fluent in English. Yeah, heels. Yeah, back in the 1500s, 1600s, heels were brought in by men for sure. Jagmeet caught Pierre with his housing record. Yeah, right? And he just outright lied. Now, to me, the reporter, there should have been a fact checker in the moment there. And I'm getting a little tired of, by the way, of there should be fact checkers at all these events. The story about Rachel Gilmore losing her position as fact checker with CTV was disgusting to me. Absolutely disgusting. We're living in a world where disinformation and propaganda and lies are happening, and we need our mainstream media to assure us that it's real facts coming out. And CTV, I haven't even watched them since that happened because they're not fact checking. So why are you listening to their stories, right? That they would do that to Rachel Gilmore? What a crock of shit that was. Okay, Patrice Roy. Don't know, Blanchette was not as good as he should have been. That's just kind of hard to tell because you see his arms going, talking with his French hands. But again, when you have a translator that's trying to be giving an emotionally charged comment, it fell flat. So for us English viewers, I'm going to say there was no shift because of that phenomenon. Now, our beaver Sean, he lives back east and he happens to be French. So he watched it in French from a French lens. And some of the comments that I'm having here tonight was from listening to what he had to say, especially in terms of it didn't really shift any of the voting scene that's going on in Quebec right now. Nothing new happened. CBC fact-checked it after. Yeah, I watched a little bit of CBC's coverage after the show. They weren't doing that in the moment for the first half hour after the show. So, I don't know, Rosemary Barton was on there, kind of your typical CBC host, but I didn't see a lot of that. But after you watch the debate and then you watch a half hour of reflection on that, it just it burns out, right? Burns out. So if that happened, I'm really grateful. It needed to happen because there was a lot of misinformation flying around out there. And here's why the fuck was Rebel News there? You tell me, right? Why were they allowed to be in there, but someone like Rachel Gilmore gets what happened to her? And not only was Rebel News there, apparently they sent about 15 reporters. 15. And we have normalized that right-wing, far right-wing conversation. We have given it space in our public arena. When to me, it's a morality issue, a lot of this, right? Because they have not earned their place to be recognized as journalists. Rebel News does not have a journalist tax. They're not regulated under the journalistic governing body that guarantees integrity, things like that. So no, they should not have been welcomed in. Otherwise, why couldn't Beaver Politics just be in there? We haven't, we're not listed as like some credible journalist. If we were, we could be there. But to have Rebel News go in there with the kind of trouble that they have created in other political environments, to me, that was a wrong step. It's a wrong step. I think I took a note about that. The only person who really responded well to Rebel News was Jagmeet, and that he didn't respond. I'm not going to give you space. I'm not going to give you voice to rise. The far right wing, Rebel News is full of lies and disinformation. They run propaganda campaigns from Russia. It's all been proven, and they should not be given a seat at the table. That's just my opinion there. They whined and complained to be there, and they got too many and they got too many questions. And let them whine and complain because I don't hear too much other things going on. They're entertainment outlets, right? Just like Fox News. It's Fox News entertainment, right? And a lot of people have been shafted by believing that they are. She is biased. Paige is saying I'm biased. Oh, I know. I don't see them as a news outlet. I don't know if the she in this case is me or not, so I'm not going to respond to that. But if you think I'm biased, I'm going to tell you, yeah, I am. I'm open about my biases. I'm far left wing. I don't actually have a left leaning party far enough left for me, or a party far enough leaning left for me to even vote. according to my value systems. And I bring all of those biases to the table unapologetically because I recognize them and I give that information to you. So when you take information from me, you know where I'm coming from, right? I'm not ashamed of my biases, right? I don't have a closet I need to hide them in. Rachel, they wanted to send 15, but they were only allowed 5. Oh, okay. Right on. Only allowed 5. But to me, 15 was overkill as well. But then I thought, I don't know how many CBC are there or CTV or Global. I don't know. Beaverton in 22 minutes should have been allowed in there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. God, I love those shows. Okay. All right. So we have 10 people in the room now. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. 3,000 likes. Let's get the tapping and clapping and sharing is caring thing happening out there and see if we can get another 10 people in the room. The Beaver Network is running Beaver Politics shows 7 nights a week and then 5 days a week. So we're all out here being volunteers to talk about politics. Our passion is motivating us to be involved, and we're appreciative of anybody who wants to sit down and have some conversation with us. So last night's debate was great. One of the things, my next topic I wanted to talk about, and please, if anybody wants to come on up and have a conversation, you're welcome up into it. Pierre smirk while answering questions. There's one little eye. Yeah, I must say. Something I wanted to talk about on today's show is I listened to the press conference that Wab Kinew put out yesterday about the big hydro projects going on in Manitoba. And it was very impacting, and also because I aspire to the motto, the political is personal. Last week on Finding Your Own Damn Way, I had a guest called Path to Where? And a fellow joined us from, and his tag was Arctic something. I apologize, I don't know his whole name tag, but he was talking about the struggles economically up in Nunavut, up in the 3 new territories in the Arctic. And Path to Where pointed out that, old colonial Canada took nomadic people and put them into communities and used them for certain purposes and created these sort of state-dependent communities because economically, capitalism, it's so much money to have these communities function, to get them energy, to build housing, to stock the grocery shelves, offer services like healthcare, like dental, all kinds of services in these little communities that are being starved because they have to almost 100% be reliant on government. So Path to Where was, and we talked about the military and the military's influence and the bases up there as well. But Path to Where was sort of just saying, he wasn't feeling hopeful because of how much money it would be to get those systems of communities supported, and that some of those communities would just be allowed to fade away, so to speak. He didn't say it like that, but basically the funding's not there. And the fella from Arctic, he actually is an Indigenous person and was working with different exposure to different treaty negotiations and things going on. Anyway, Wab Kinew announced this week that, as part of what Manitoba is doing to stabilize domestically first is to increase its hydro capacity. So they have got a partnership going with quite a few people, and they are going to supply power to the Arctic, 50 megawatts out of 450 megawatt dam. I don't know if it's called megawatts or gigabyte watts or whatever, but 50 of them are going to go power Nunavut, right? And at the same time, Wab Kinew is making this deal to increase hydro to actually make it feasible for these northern communities to sustain. He is having conversations with Finland, and there was 3 countries that were in Manitoba to do trade and resource development work and to get the resources out of Manitoba through the Arctic seas over into Europe. perfect, and they can, the hydro is one of the ways to combat the lack of pipeline. And the conversation in last night's debate too, some of this was covered, but like Wab Kinew said, it's, there's going to be an energy corridor across Canada in order to stabilize domestically. Like the Conservatives, it doesn't have to be all pipeline, does it? Pipelines are wanted in Alberta, build more pipeline. In Saskatchewan, build more pipeline. You get to Manitoba, hydro. We're going to have a corridor of hydro. You get to Ontario may want a corridor of nuclear energy. You get to Quebec again, where they do not want dirty oil from Alberta. That corridor can go back to hydro. And then back east, pipelines could be whatever the provinces want. It's this corridor idea that is really sellable. And it is about utilizing all the different types of renewable energy, of the pipeline and the stuff that isn't renewable. And I think that is a wonderful idea. And it's something that Canadians can work with. I don't know. I didn't think it was such a bizarre idea. And Wab Kinew, though, he's so funny. He's sitting there and he comes in, he's got his press, he's got the people around him, his administration, and he's signing, and doing it with the big letters, holding it up like Donald Trump. And then he says, he's looking around and goes, this is when you're supposed to clap, just like what they do with Donald Trump, But basically what he's done is bypass the need to be reliant on the United States. And that guy is headed towards a run for prime minister at some place down the road, if you ask me. But it was just great to Beaver Politics. We had a conversation last week about the Arctic. I had never had that conversation before. I wasn't familiar with the intricacies of the Arctic area, and boy, was my eyes opened. And then to have Wab Kinew sit down, and not only that, when the reporters asked him questions, he had answers always. He knew his stuff. He knew the layers. He knew the contractors. He knew, who was creating the projects. He knew the dollar amounts. He had a costed platform, and nobody could, trip him up in their questioning. And there was a lot of good questions, I must say. Sometimes I think these NDP, sometimes I think our left-leaning people get the grill just a little bit harder from the reporters, right? Even Quebec gets oil from the United States, maybe originally from Alberta. Well, in Quebec, the reason Alberta, the pipeline went exit stage right down into the United States where it was being sold cheaper. The reason that happened is Quebec, with its environmental laws, did not want the refineries that were, the pipeline demanded a refinery be built on the St. Lawrence River, basically, on waterfront property. And Quebec said no, they weren't willing to take that risk. They had other options, right? Other options might look a little different now with what's happening with tariffs. But the bottom line is Quebec is really, really strong on its environmental protection. Quebec is really, really strong on protecting everything. Its citizens, its daycare. It protects its unions. Quebec takes care of its people. And that's why Quebec matters. Like I said earlier, Alberta's upset about not having a stronger voice because everything happens around Eastern Canada. Diversify your voice. You put all your eggs in one basket in the Conservative voice. Like I said, Conservatives don't have to pay attention to you. Stephen Harper had majority government for how long? Did he change the transfer payment rules so that Albertans didn't have to pay more than their fair share? Did he change the regulatory systems that allow pipelines to travel from one province to the other? Pipeline got to get to the coast. How come Harper just didn't fix that for Alberta? How come the federal government, when Conservatives have been in power, have not satisfied the complaints that are coming out of Alberta? It's because Alberta will not change its vote. It's because they're not swing voters, right? Quebec, they're swing voters, right? If they want more daycare, they're going to talk to the politicians and they're going to elect the ones that give them the daycare. If they want more industry built up for Bombardier, for example, with the airplane, or maybe it's shipbuilding, or maybe it's a manufacturing company, They're going to talk to the politicians, and whoever fills that need is going to get their vote. And they're not tied to the party. They're tied to the benefit of the people. And that's why Quebec is successful. And by the way, you know how everybody gets, why does Quebec get special status? Quebec doesn't have any more special status than is available to every other single province in Canada. They have not stepped out of the rules and made a special federation deal with why they get the daycare's needs met. As for instance, they didn't do a special deal. Quebec just takes and elects politicians, so you're going to give their people the best deal. And they respect entities. They expect their political landscape values unions, values having a multi-party situation so there can be diversity at the table. They value political education. Their education system is different. So I think that every province has the ability to be as demanding and to be as in the forefront as Quebec. But you got to get the work done, right? You got to get the work done. As an Albertan, I have never and will never vote Conservative. Thank you very much for that. You are going to change the system. Now, Danielle Smith wanted, we're in democracy, so the majority rules. And we know the majority lives in Alberta, the majority lives in Quebec and in Southern Ontario. And then you have your hotspots like Calgary and Vancouver, right? Which still don't balance what's happening there. But in a democracy, if you want your voice louder, you grow your voice. You make it attractive for people to move to Alberta. You make people want to be there. And then instead of 4.5 million people, you suddenly have 10 million people. You build your infrastructure. People come to your province when you have schools to raise. When they're raising kids, they need school systems. They need healthcare systems. They need to see a strong, robust infrastructure, healthy system, and then they'll move to the province. Now, because if you hang around in Canada, you understand that Alberta's energy grid is failing. You know that they've cut severely to healthcare, severely to the education system. So who are they going to go get to fill the spots, right? They open up immigration. And suddenly there's a lot of brown people in Alberta, and Albertans, I think, were thinking maybe it was just going to be white people coming out there. And so there's a lot of pushback. But if you want to be a stronger voice in democracy, then you have to have the numbers. And so you have to grow your numbers. And so Alberta is on this, inviting people to move to Alberta. However, they don't have the infrastructure. They have decimated their infrastructure. And a lot of people get there and they go, uh-oh. They go, uh-oh. So hopefully some people just keep moving on. By voting for the same party that failed them for 10 years. Yeah, Jay Skinny. I don't understand that about Canada in general. I think that's something that Alberta suffers with deeply. Voting Conservative no matter what, but there are pockets. Edmonton is a huge pocket, and there are pockets of Liberals. Unfortunately, it can be quite violent. We've seen the Liberal, what was it, just 2 weeks ago? There was 300 Liberal signs vandalized with, the SS sign all spray painted on. 300. Think of the energy it took to go and destroy 300 signs. That's freaking political commitment, right? That's the somebody's lost their way when they're that angry, right? They've lost their way. But it makes it difficult to be a left-leaning person in basically such a racist, sexist, homophobic, far right-wing, white supremacist area of the world, right? It's hard. But the fight is happening. Neshi, he has a good run at taking Smith down at the next election. NFQ, I hear many people vote PP because of crime, but Carney's crime plan is comprehensive, no stomping on. WO, stomping on. I don't know what the WO means, but we're stomping on. Yeah, well, PP's crime bill, whatever. Let me tell you something. Under Stephen Harper, here's a little fun fact. Stephen Harper stacked the Supreme Court justices across Canada. We have approximately 800 of them, by the way. And under Stephen Harper, he appointed almost 600 of them, I believe is the number. That's a lot. That's a lot working in your favor. This release and catch and release, that whole system was set up under the Conservatives. And they just, it's not working in their favor right now. But the coming down hard on crime, everybody comes hard on crime. There isn't a leader out there that has that passion any less than the next leader next to them, right? The service delivery around that is what would look differently. It's more punitive and it's like a boots to the ground effect with the Conservatives, but you know what? Housing and policing people and this conversation about tough on crime to me is about really getting tough on addicts. And that's where they want to, kind of sidestep these laws. Look what Danielle Smith is doing. They've tabled legislation to kind of come up with mini concentration camps for people with addiction. Let's just take them off the street, put them in a camp, sober them up, and take them 50 miles out of town and force them to do A, B, C, and D. And we know those systems have not worked. But that, because the Conservatives and having their leader kind of, it's about that hating the same people. They all hate the same people, and addicts fall into that category. Maybe you have somebody in your personal life that's an addict, so it shifts the way you emotionally connect to the issue. But let's face it, most people have succumbed to the myths and the misunderstanding of what's happening with people who are addicted. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I'd like to live below the poverty line, please. And I'd like to be so, addicted to this substance that I can't function enough to work. Nope, nobody does that. There's a series of unfortunate circumstances to bring people to the table that way. And all we need to do is to be kind and compassionate. And for some people, because I've worked in the homeless populations in my communities, some people, it's not going to get better. And all you can do is be kind to them until they pass away. And I've seen that. But there are many people that are new within those shelter systems, new to the world of addiction, that if you got that intervention in there, we have a chance to shift the way it's going to go moving forward, right? The other part, tough on crime, that I wanted to bring up is the Conservative Party has released a policy declaration. It's 186 pages long, and in there is all the wording around their tough on crime stuff. And one piece that's really disturbing to me is how they want to get tough on crime for putting in harsher penalties if you kill a woman that's pregnant. And it sounds like, oh, who wouldn't agree with that? Of course we want harsher penalties. So does Jagmeet. So does every leader running wants harsher penalties for that. And guess what? That is written into our system. So why are you campaigning about something that already exists and has remedy within our system? So what would be the purpose in a Conservative spending so much time, even going so far as to give space in their policy declaration for this? And what they want to do is they want to adjust the criminal code so that they can add personhood to the word fetus. So if you murder a woman who's pregnant, who has a fetus, the word fetus then gets personhood. That then can be used to set precedent for the AB conversation. Sneaky little bastards, aren't they? That's what that's about. And they can't be upfront about that. And as he says, he won't do anything about AB. He has a full team of Conservatives that every single one of them voted against AB supports. Every one of them. Look what's happening in Alberta. They have legislated their healthcare system into the Catholic Church's hands. A private healthcare entity run by the Catholics now has control over this healthcare service delivery in terms of hospitals in Alberta. So if you're looking for an AB, they're not morally obligated to provide you with one. How convenient. Oh, it's not the government's decision. Just a bunch of bullshit is what that is. Bunch of bullshit. Dylan's in the conversation. Hello, Dylan. Thank you for joining. Private jails. Oh, yes. Let's talk about that. I mean, the United States has built an industry on private jails, haven't they? Because let's face it, slavery never ended in the United States and morphed into the criminal justice prison system, right? Especially under arresting people for marijuana, cannabis use. Fill those rooms up. And then you give low labor contracts to corporations that want to build a widget, want to have a call center. They're using prison workers for low income wage, right? Most of them are Black people in the prison system in the United States, and it's very profitable. Very profitable. The United States is privately contracting prisons in El Salvador. The landscape, the dystopian landscape that can evolve from privatizing your prison system, we see it. We see it in The Handmaid's Tale too, right? Let's not go down that route in Canada. Let's not go down that route. People who are incarcerated, if you're going to run an industry, you're going to have to make sure there's going to be people in those rooms, people doing the free labor, or the industry will not run. And so people are going to start being arrested for things that never would have ultimately got them put in jail to begin with. Anyways, that's kind of my take on the whole private jail system. Yeah, it disgusts me too, Megan. It disgusts me too. The leftist loon words are just thrown. Yes, Dustin. Come on up with your right wing loon words. Yeah, what are your right wing loon words? What are some of the big phrases you got to offer? Enlighten us with your intellectually stimulating conversation, because you ain't showing it in your comment. I hear many people vote PP because of crime, but Carney... Oh, I already read that comment, yeah. Notley and the NDP started to diversify Alberta's economy, and then we got stupid again. Yeah, that's true. I mean, 4 years out of 50 years, and they still want to blame every problem that the Albertans have on Rachel Notley when they just need to look in the mirror. They had a really good thing going when Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Lougheed made Petro-Canada and the whole energy thing really boomed, made Alberta, thanks to Liberals, made Alberta one of the richest provinces in Canada for like 50 years, right? And they had what was called the Wild Rose Fund, and they had a contingency fund, like a lot of money put aside for a rainy day, like when the oil crash happened in 2008. Except the reality was their Conservative premiers spent it all of it, billions, spent it. But it was Rachel Notley, and when she took over a broke economy, because all this, your buffer fund has been spent, you blame that on the NDP. It was such a ridiculous. Do Conservatives not understand how ridiculous they looked with that 4-year blame situation? But in 4 years, Rachel Notley made some good inroads on expanding that party, and she is going to continue that journey. But Alberta votes against its own interests the same way a trans person voting Conservative votes against their own interests. The same way someone living in extreme poverty would vote for Conservative. The same way somebody living in any minority group that votes Conservative is voting against their own interests, right? And Canada, I think as a whole, has a problem that way. When you look at 150 years of Canada going back and forth between Liberals and Conservatives, one gets in, 4 years, 8 years, people get mad, try the other party, and they go back and forth 150 years not giving another party a try. And I think it's time to try. Now, personally, as a left-leaning person, I've always voted NDP. This will be the first year in my life, I'm 61, that I won't be voting NDP, because I do not believe the federal platform through Jagmeet is left-leaning enough for me. I want to know why there isn't screaming conversations about crown corporations being rebuilt. Why housing isn't being solved through a national unity crown corporation. Why our grocery inflation prices aren't kept under control through a crown corporation. Why our energy and CANDU, oh, this conversation gets me mad. You know, Stephen Harper sells off our nuclear CANDU reactors at dirt cheap prices to, I think it was CANDU is the name of the Canadian reactors, right? Sold that rate off, and now we have a need, and whoever bought that, I think it was SNL-Lavalin, bought that from Stephen Harper, dirt cheap. And then Canadian tax dollars had to pay to train SNL-Lavalin to know how to run a nuclear project because they've never done it before. Well, fucking absurd decisions made under conservatism. And here we are, we have a need for that business. And that crown corporation could have been feeding us Canadians right now. But instead, no. Every crown corporation has to be sold off so conservatives can balance their budget. So that's what Stephen Harper did. He got a surplus budget, took him 2 years to burn through that money, and he ran deficits every year after that, and he sold off every one of our functioning crown corporations under the guise that the free market will take care of us, and look where that got us, huh? Look where that got us. So we have to rebuild that. And the NDP should be running on that message, and they're not. You know, they're talking about healthcare. Healthcare is provincial. Other than saying we're going to give you more money, that's the end of the conversation for the feds, right? Jurisdiction. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. Just raving on here. I hear many people vote PP because of crime. I don't know why that comment keeps coming back down to me. PP has came up with BS and the uneducated could understand. I think, you know, in understanding some of why conservative messaging through slogans, through simple messaging works so well is because of conservatism as a person. You really live in there's a fear-based approach to everything. Physically speaking, we've got a large amygdala gland, and so a first response is fear. We all have amygdala glands. We all usually respond to new information with an impulse of fear. But what happens is the fear travels from the base of your brain where it's created, goes through a whole bunch of neurotransmitters to the frontal lobes, where reasoning and critical thinking calms down that fear, reasons it out. So what happens with conservatives is there's been no development of the neurotransmitters to the frontal lobes. And so they live in that emotional space of fear. And fear is nothing to laugh at. It's a horrible place to live. And it's a horrible place to come from all your approaches with. But every person has to learn that when you do a self-analysis, you have to learn that your fear impulse is important. We all need to have a piece of judgment that we use to protect ourselves with. However, when you're letting it impede your rationality, there's a problem. And with conservatives, that's where they're stuck, right? The reality is when you have a typical conservative probably grew up indoctrinated through Christianity here in Canada. Conservatism and conservatives in another country may grow up in another religious system, but the bottom line is conservatism and its general, slow approach towards change, people that enjoy that and link into that, they can often find comfort in spaces like religion. And so if you've been indoctrinated under Christianity, for instance, you are preconditioned to follow one guy, right? One guy, one dude. You're preconditioned. You are in a comfort zone that has been established, whether it was like the hums in the churches when you were 4 years old and the comfort feelings of joy you got around that. And then as you learn your Bible lessons and you learn that your one God comes before everything, you are being preconditioned to worship a leader. And so when the conservatives come along, and that's what they offer, right? They want tiny Trump as a leader. Trump in the United States and the MAGA crowd's a good example of this. Anybody who was down that Christian nationalism lens easily jumped on board because they like the idea of worshiping a leader. That's why Tiny Trump's been out doing all those rallies, doing the same kind of populist politicking that Trump did to become successful in the United States. That's happening right here in Canada. Tiny Trump just did 3 years of running back and forth across Canada having rallies. That's not what we do here. We don't want that. The majority of people don't want that. Majority lean to the left. 70% of Canadians lean to the left. All right, I want to just take a minute here. It's 10 to 2 and remind people that we do gifts. We have gift goals. I appreciate all the gifts that have come in so far. These gifts go to support the emotional work that the hosts do, and to, help with some costs like graphics and stuff. We have subscriptions, and that subscription gets you access to our Discord, where we have a very busy beaver crew over there, where you have more detailed conversations, and you can post articles, and you can have group chats, and you can make sort of like, you can get into your subgroups in our Discord. We also have our YouTube channel, so we welcome you to subscribe for free to the YouTube. Every show, within the next day or so after the show, is published on YouTube. And if you miss a piece of information, you can go back and look it up. So appreciate that. Berta Obama, baby, they just need lies that sound pretty. Yeah, that's it. Hey, Pasty Native, thanks for dropping in. Appreciate that. Friendship necklace. Model of therapy is mostly national thinking, and as I had no access to leafing it myself, I'm not sure if I understand what's written here, Joker. Model of therapy is mostly rational thinking, and as I had no access to it, I had to learn it myself. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that point up, because nobody is born with any particular information, right? We're all indoctrinated through our family system to begin with, is usually how it works. I'm not saying there's not exceptions to the rules, but nobody should feel bad because they weren't born with the information. But what happens is, and unfortunately, this is sort of like a reality inside of the conservative brain. Hang on, I got to do a little puzzle piece here. Oh, because they think I'm a robot because I've only had me speaking and not. There we go. What was I saying? When it comes to how a conservative experiences change, it's a painful event in the brain. So if you've been indoctrinated for 20 years, and it's a painful event in everybody's brain. I grew up very Catholic, and then I went down a Jehovah's Witness cult road, okay? And now I see Catholics as cultish as well. However, I had to deconstruct my religious place in the world, and I had to admit that I was wrong, and everything I believed in was wrong, and it hurt. It physically hurt. It took effort. I had to sit down and read and go, oh my jumping Jesus, I was wrong about this, right? I was wrong. And then you adjust accordingly and you acknowledge. And so many people from the conservative side of things just won't go there. It is, I get that painful moment and ignore the facts and reality. I want to live in my indoctrination. And you can find they find their echo chambers of it. And so they don't have anybody. That's one thing about the left-leaning world, is we push each other to grow and to challenge beliefs. That's what, as they say, it's maybe a little bit of a tangent here, but, in looking at how the right wing successfully got Trump elected by finding young men and radicalizing them in the rooms of Twitch, in all the gaming rooms, and really grasping onto social media and utilizing that in a way more effective way than the left-leaning crew did. One of the big things they did, devalued education. I'm the only graduate I'm one of 6 children, but I had a brother died very young at like 6 months old. So I grew up with 5 siblings, but I'm the only one really that went to university. And that was celebrated at one time. Wow, look what she's doing. But now that I speak with my left-leaning voice, oh no, you're just regurgitating a bunch of bullshit from universities, the woke ideology, and suddenly getting extra education is vilified by the right wing, right? It's vilified. And I say bullshit to that, because our left-leaning group, we've got education. We've got preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, universities, master's degrees. That system exists, and it's time to start putting it in its high place that it normally should be. That's what I think needs to happen. I think part of the messaging and the taking down of left-leaning and celebrating the right wing and not changing, part of that is in the devaluing of education. Hang on. 12 new messages. Thanks for the heart. Who sent that? Sean, thank you for the mustache and the heart. I'm not sure if I sound okay in English. Part of my mutual aid is offering semantic tools. I don't know what that means. It kind of sounds vague. So unless you've got maybe give me an example of where, of the semantic tool, I might be able to kind of respond to that a little better. Can't wait to see you guys cry. Oh, cry, babies. I'll tell you this, I'm a left-leaning person. I have never had representation at the federal level. I've had 61 years of experiencing loss in federal elections and often in provincial elections. Yeah. So yeah, this girl don't cry. This don't cry. Big girls don't cry. You're just really, somebody that is going to relish when they see somebody else's suffering is what you're going to do, right? Because cruelty is the point with the Maple Megas here in Canada. You guys like it. You like hating. That's why you like the Conservative leader, because he hates the same people as you. So when he degrades them and when he puts them down and when he puts in ideas that are going to restrict their freedoms, oh, you're all about that. You're all about that. You want to celebrate the misery. Yeah, well, tune in, because this time it's going to be the right wing doing the tears. But we're not going to, yes, there's some gloating involved, because we're going to celebrate the win, and there's going to be a win. There's going to be a win, because the Liberals are going to stomp through there. Little tiny Trump lost the plot, right? Fuck tiny Trump, the whole fuck Trudeau campaign. They threw all their eggs in one basket. The carbon tax and Trudeau, they scapegoated Trudeau. Right? Everything is his fault. Blame one guy. You get rid of one guy. And then the next guy is savior, right? Conservatives love that leader believing in the one dude thing. It feeds their indoctrination that they don't even recognize, right? But the politician recognizes it. Oh yes, populist politicking is well recognized by the Conservative leader. Cruelty is the point. Yeah, we are cultish. Don't follow anymore. We are cultish. Don't follow anymore. Lori, I'm not sure if you were talking to me or maybe you're talking to Rocky. I'm stuck in Montreal in severe poverty, offering fir tree. My semantics tool is revolution in itself. Your semantic here. Let me try something here. Relating to the body, especially distinct from the mind. So you're stuck in Montreal in severe poverty, offering fir tree, offering for free my semantic tools is revolution in and of itself. So offering your body, is that what you're saying? That you're physically offering yourself as part of the revolution? I think most people are going to have to come, it triggers a thought that people are returning to more grassroots approaches. Is that what you're getting at? If you'd like to come up and join the conversation, explain yourself, I'm welcome to have you up here. Conservative brain freeze. Yes. Mostly helps people in capitalism, trauma, stress with nervous system. Oh, I see what you're getting at. Okay. I see what you're getting at. Yes. There's one of the things I appreciated about Viva Politics is people coming here and being able to express their existential fear around what's happening in the United States, what's happening to us as a country, right? That's a threat that I don't think people ever really, let's just say it's palatable. They taste it now, and it's so real. And so semantic tools, yes, would definitely help. Capitalism, trauma, stress, nervous system work. Yes, there's so many self-care things that can help. And you know what? On TikTok, there's a variety of people. We have a show on Saturdays, a mental health show with Jana, and she has been with Canada Mental Health for 15 years. So she's a good, credible voice. And she talks about the semantic tools for self-care. I know some of them from my own journey as a social worker, and mostly worked in medical social work and women's health. The self-care tools that I used, Wim Hof breathing, was one I would use to get me through my work days, because I could do that breathing technique in my office. And I like to walk the talk of self-care. So I have a counselor in my life, not consistently, because who's got the money? But believe me, I as often as I can, I like to at least once a year kind of check in and make sure that I've got all my biases in check and I'm aware of them as they impact my moments. All right, let's see who wants to come up. Pasty Native. Come on up. Thanks for joining.
Hey, the missus.
Hey, thanks for joining. Here, now turn your volume up here.
Not too bad. I had the Conservatives come door knocking today, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to be voting for Pierre. You're not going to be able to change my mind. He's all like, well, do you want to change my mind? About like, not right now, but if you would like to, you can join me on the Beaver Network later.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes.
No.
I
like, you can try to change my mind, and I'm all like, how about we do it here?
I mean, it would have been interesting. I guess it would be like inviting the Joe. It's like, because we know so much of the messaging and we see it through, we apply different lenses to the same message, and we use critical thinking. So we try to put ourselves in the shoes of the conservative. I often do that, especially when it comes to religious value-based decisions like AB. I want to, I'm atheist myself, so I don't have, I don't have that impacting my decision making. But I do know that people do, and a lot of conservatives do. And if we're ever going to bridge a gap, it's going to be with religion. It's going to be in meeting them and finding ways to protect that. And you know what? Those ways exist. They already exist. Canada grew. We were not like the United States. We don't have a separation of church and state here. That was not written into our founding documents anywhere along the way. And so the church very much so was that moral compass that grew alongside of the capitalist, colonialistic nation that we now know as Canada. So we have to acknowledge that, whether we like it or not. Our moral compass was based on Christianity. So we have to take the best and we have to leave the rest. And in terms of something like AB, we have protected every religious person's right to not engage.
That's 100%. If you don't want one, don't get one. If you don't need one, don't get one. It's the whole thing of it's supposed to be your right to choose. 100%. I also wanted to bring some light too, because I know after the debate last night, when Kearney was getting his questions and stuff from the far right media, um, and they asked him how many genders there are. A lot of people are taking it that he said that there were only two. He corrected the person asking the question and went, in regards to sex, there are two,
Mhm.
which most trans people will accept that answer because yeah, in regards to sex, like the classification scientifically of sex, there's two,
You know
but
what's
there's
important to me about it's not that every politician understand every issue at because you can get degrees in specific studies, right? Like when I went into my master's, I went to master's to get the story, but I got accepted into the master's program, but it was the gender studies master's program that I was accepted into. That's how much detail. You can study these issues at master's levels, at PhD levels. So don't expect every politician to come to the table understanding all the medical stuff behind this issue or but they have to be willing and open to hear the information and to accept the scientific information. That's what I look for, and I
that's
see.
why I want to say that like he did not say that there were only two genders.
No, he did not, right? And I do believe his a non-binary child, right?
Yeah,
Is
he has a non-binary child who he has supported through their transition.
right. So I think just knowing that it comforts me. I don't need to tear it apart any further than that, right? And yet here we have tiny Trump who, when he says I only know of two genders, what he's basically saying is I don't know science, you know.
That he doesn't like trans people. He's made that pretty damn clear.
And then there's the outright bigotry of it all, right? The homophobia that's involved in that, the feeding the maple base that's involved in that. Um, yeah, that man to me is he's corrupted, morally corrupted, right? And I don't have
I'm
any.
going to vote tomorrow. I'm
You're
getting
voting
it done.
tomorrow?
I'm voting tomorrow. I'm getting it done because I will be happy when this is all said and over and done with.
Yeah. We get to vote this weekend. I got the cards in the mail, so I'm gonna go out and do my part. Political drama unplugged. That's another show. AI. Is it AI or Al? I don't know. Anyways,
AI.
the debate was. Did you watch much of it, or did you have to tune it in and out because of its dryness?
I watched a good amount of it until my phone died.
Okay.
Then I had to plug it in because we were having supper.
Mhm. I find that living out west here, we a lot of stuff falls in the supper time hour because the most of the population is 3 hours ahead. So 8 o'clock at night in Ontario, things are rocking for the after supper crowd, and I'm just getting there. Yeah, I feel that way about Beaver Politics every night. It's not at 5 o'clock our time. I'm always making supper whenever the nighttime shows are on.
That's
Um,
like your show. It's on during my supper time. It's 5 o'clock here in Ontario.
I've thought of that a few times, believe me. We need to identify supporters and make sure they vote. Rad Mike, you know what? This is the boots on the ground work that gets the work done the day of the voting, right? Volunteer your car to go drive some seniors from their long-term care residence to where they vote, or um, not long-term care, uh, you know, secondary housing and people that struggle with transportation. Any seniors group, like we have a seniors council here in Prince George, and we have different um, uh, little drop-in centers that cater to seniors. It's about connecting with those places and offering your services up for seniors and getting people to the voting station. Some of the parties will hire buses and they'll go around, or they may go to a small community off grid and pick everybody up and bring them all into town just to vote. That's the boots on the ground work that has to happen, and it makes a difference. We know there are ridings that are so close that it comes down to 20, 30 votes, right? That couple
I
of
know I keep telling everybody I know, remember, go vote. Voting starts on this day. You have this long to be able to vote, and then this is election day. Please go vote.
Here's a question being posed. What do I think about China and Carney? China wants Carney to win. I wonder why. What I think about China and Carney is that Carney abides by the law and Carney abides by previously established contracts with China. And the biggest
Also, mutual respect for a sovereign nation.
well, there's that. Let's start there. Yeah, that's a good place to start. Thank you. You know, under the last conservative government, literally on the way out the door, like days before they left, they signed the Foreign Investment Protection Act. And that agreement was signed with China. And that's a 32-year agreement that gives China preferred interest economically to do resource development. Some of the upper hand that China got in that agreement was that disputes can be resolved in courts in China, not in Canada here. Oh, that sounds like protecting Canadians, doesn't it? Doesn't it? So we have this agreement that Canada has been working with since Harper left. That agreement, by the way, I don't know if you know the story about that, but that agreement was not because they had a majority. They did not put it through the normal parliamentary debate process, and they just went ahead and did the deal, and they went over to Russia. They signed that agreement in Russia. Chinese president met in Russia. Harper flew to Russia. There was representatives from Russia there, and they signed that agreement very quickly behind closed doors. And Trudeau had to abide by that court agreement. It's for 32 years. And now Carney has to abide by that court agreement as well. So that's what I think Carney and China are going to be about. Carney knows that agreement. He's going to do his best to make sure that Canada stays within its limit. Know your limits, play within it. So no, I think that Carney's the best person to negotiate with China. China may want Carney to win. You would find that strange considering they made the deal with the Conservatives, right? But let's face it, our Conservatives are Trump in the United States now. Tiny Trump is Pierre Poilievre, right? So China doesn't want to work with the United States. And they see working with the Conservative government here in Canada is doing that.
Yeah, they've also been directly addressing the U.S. people and telling them they need to start a revolution and stand up to Trump.
Yeah,
There's been a bunch of them.
All right, so somebody else is asking about 9 Liberal members asked to step down. I don't know anything about this. Are you talking?
I'm pretty sure that was the the Conservatives that had that many people drop down.
They did. I mean, Liberals had people drop out of the race as well. I don't know if it was 9. I don't know. But all I know is that the Liberals are willing and able, are willing to boot the people that don't meet the criteria that will get them elected. And you look at someone like Aaron Gunn and what's happening here in British Columbia with the
that's so disgusting.
That's like that guy is outright a residential
I do not understand how residential school denialism is not a crime, like how in Germany it is illegal to deny what Mustache Man did.
Yeah. We're not there yet, right? We're barely letting people
He based his camps off of the Canadian residential school system. How can we not be there yet?
Well, interesting about it. I'm 61, as I've said many times, but I didn't go to school. I didn't get my high school until I was 40. And not that I didn't have education. I had some education in mostly working with disabilities and with computers. But anyway, when I had studied First Nations as part of our social work course, and I was 40 years old, first time learning about residential school. I live in northern British Columbia. I'm surrounded by Indigenous people, and I did not know this piece of information, and I'm like pretty mainstream whitey, right? So I think that I'm a reflection of how most people didn't understand and didn't know. And I don't feel like I need to apologize for information I wasn't aware of. But once I became aware, and I'll tell you, I I felt so much shame. Oh, it was a process. It hurt. And I had to, when I learned that information and knew the role that I fit in there and how that had to shift, that's emotional work. That's powerful work. That's what makes people, that's where critical thinking accomplishes something, because you're able to um, get past the fear, right? And well, for me with residential school, it was also shame and guilt, and to know that because where I lived, the last residential school shut down in 1996, just down the road. And so the teacher I had in my course was a student in that school. And when I did statistic work for a couple of the shelters here in town, but one in particular, I was in my course learning about what happened to Indigenous men and women who joined the army, and they lost their status. And when they came home, because they had lost their status, they lost rights to their homes on reserve, and that these people were homeless because of their serving in the military in Canada. And so I am looking at pictures from 1940s of these men. Salonis is one of the last names that's common out here in our Indigenous community, and that name stuck out to me. And I'm not identifying anybody in particular here, but I'm looking at on the big screen in my classroom the names of these soldiers and the pictures of them. And those names are the names on the shelter guest list. They are still homeless 50 years later, right? The colonial system oppressed them. And then as I'm learning this and realizing I'm part of this shelter, oh, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Oh yeah, but it goes with the, because even me, I was taught by my YT family members that uh,
Yeah.
they happened long ago. Nobody's responsible for it. And then, as my mom was reconnecting with community and I was growing up, she taught me about a lot of this. So I'd come back, combat my friends. Oh, it was hundreds of years ago. Get over it. No, do you realize the last official day school in Canada closed in 1998?
Yeah, apparently there's another one, like the one here in BC was 96, and I've heard of another one in Saskatchewan closing a year or two later. I think it was
Yeah,
Saskatchewan, Manitoba. So that was new
and
learning and
like,
for me to learn that.
and even with the day schools and stuff and the residential schools closing, it doesn't mean that the teachers were fired. They were just put into a different school,
Mhm. That's right.
which most of the time had multiple Indigenous students.
In our community, we have gone through a renaming piece. For instance, we have a
I'm
big.
gonna have to hop down. I'm sorry. I'll keep
Oh,
listening though.
okay. Actually, I'm going to be wrapping things up here pretty quick, but I do appreciate your time up here and adding to the conversation. We'll see. It's quarter
Thank
after
you for having
two.
me up.
Yeah, so I'll probably be not taking this for the next full hour. Yeah, I appreciate it. And who else? Somebody else was talking about coming on up here. Let me see. Whitney Still, you've been putting some interesting conversation down if you want to join. Alberta Cons voted down writing Indigenous rights and truth and reconciliation into law today. Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure what bill perhaps that is specifically talking about, but I know that Danielle Smith was uh, I lost my train of thought. My worry with Danielle Smith is how she's rewriting jurisdiction to get rid of municipal authority and to have everything run through the entity of the province. I'm really thinking that's a biggie. We all learn together dangers. Yeah, my son's great grandfather, that happened after World War II, and how sad, eh? And we think of that only happened to a few people, but it happened to hundreds and hundreds of Indigenous people, and then they go back to their communities, right? And then the fallout from that is what we still experience today. We've even had to make our own Remembrance Day to recognize them. Yeah, yeah. I really get upset when someone says, get over it. That kind of attitude coming at you. No, nobody tells that. to, Jewish people just to get over the Holocaust. We remind people every year so that they don't forget about the horrors that humans can attain, that aspire to, right? Like, we have got to keep those conversations in the forefront. November 11th is for a reason, especially in Canada, because I know we're a small military, but our military is specially trained, and we have a new Beaver Network show starting up with Salish Warrior Veterans, Echoes of Duty, and it's about the veterans' experience. And by listening to his conversation, you start understanding just how advanced our military is trained. When you hear stories out of the United States, yeah, they got a lot of people. You got a lot of people in your. Sorry, I gotta decline this. You have a lot of people in your army, but none of them know how to do the job, right? And I'm not saying there aren't good people down there. There are, but they have a lot of people that aren't trained. And in Canada, Canada sends over its military to train, right? We're peacekeepers. We train Ukrainian soldiers. We train in all these wars because we have the skills. So understanding that we may be small, but that we have a strong army, so to speak, it's very comforting to me. I suggest 10-minute video on YT called The Little Moccasins. It's all about my nation. Okay, I'll try to check that out. Little Moccasins. I'll write it down. I'll try to check that out. Thank you for that. Anyway, it's 2:20, so I'm going to end my show. It's been lovely for all 10, 15 people sometimes hanging out here. A small crowd. Didn't have a guest today. I'll be back next week. And I got a special guest lined up for next week, and I'll just sit on that for a little while. But in the meantime, please join us tonight for Truth and Discourse, because it's going to be covering the English debate. And we're going to have a lot of, really deep dive conversation afterwards. And the Frontline Feminists will be hosting, as well as our own Mrs. Radical here on the Beaver Network. So stay tuned. We've got a list of shows that if you can find us 7 days a week. You can find us during the daytime, in the afternoons. So please, anytime you have a need to talk all things Canadian politics, or even, right now with the United States situation, please drop in. Yes, Lori, thank you. Drop in tonight. So we'll say goodbye. We'll end it at 2:21, and hope to see you all next Thursday. Bye-bye.